Once again, good morning, everybody. This is John McDonald with Salesforce. I represent the Tableau CRM, formerly Einstein Analytics team at Capital One. I've been with Capital One, working with you guys for about 3 years now. Joined by Alex Bogdan today, our analytics solution engineer, who will take us through augmented analytics in Tableau. We will be recording this session, and the plan is that we will have that recording available to anyone within the next day or two. So if you know people that are not able to join today and have interest in viewing this, please let me know, and we'll be glad to share that. But we will get that out to all of the folks that registered for this. I would ask everybody to please go on mute once we begin. And also, if you have questions, to please post those questions in the chat in the Zoom window. But that's pretty much it. I did want to, recognize Atrium, our partner. Atrium, for those of you that have attended in the past, is one of our premier partners in the Tableau space, and working closely with Capital One, most recently with Commercial Bank Middle Markets with Andy Ruffles and his team, now expanding over into Small Business Bank as well as into HR. So the goal is that if you have questions, again, please post those in the chat, but I am going to turn it over to Alex to take it away and lead this session. And again, just please post the questions in chat and let's keep this interactive. Thanks. Alex, off to you.
Thank you, John. So once again, good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Bogdan. I'm a lead solution engineer here on the Salesforce Tableau team. Prior to joining Salesforce, I spent 2 years as a data scientist at Mass Mutual Life Insurance in Boston. And so I'm always excited to get a chance to chat with folks about the power of artificial intelligence and how this can really be infused to supercharge modern business operations. Whether you're just beginning your adventures into learning about machine learning and AI, or whether you're a seasoned data scientist, this is always a great conversation to be having, and I'm really excited to have it with you today. So to give us a sense of where we're going to be heading today, I've got this light agenda for us. To kick things off, we're going to set a really firm foundation, emphasizing what the opportunity is for AI and why there has never been a more pressing time than now to really be thoughtfully considering how we can use AI in our businesses. We're going to take a look at what analysts are saying about these particular projects and really highlight one of the key hurdles that AI projects tend to face as they're attempting to get into production. And then we're going to spend some time discussing how both the workforce and the market are evolving to really necessitate an AI-infused approach to how we do business. Once we've set the stage, dim the lights, we're then going to jump right into this idea of a business scientist, this new idea that we've coined here at Tableau and Salesforce. And then we're going to see some demonstrations about how you can get started using powerful AI tools within Tableau, within Salesforce, and throughout. Before we dive deep into the magic, I do have to emphasize that if there are going to be purchasing decisions made, please make them on the product as it currently is and not on any future enhancements and things of that nature. And with that, we will jump right in. So starting us off, we're going to take a look at this State of the Union and really underscore the value of the opportunity that's presented before us. And so what we're looking at here is an excerpt from a McKinsey report that is underscoring that there is approximately $1 trillion in potential value over the next decade or so related directly to getting artificial intelligence and machine learning initiatives up and running. And we can see that of that trillion, roughly 660 billion of it are related to what are called traditional AI and analytics. And that's really going to be the heart of our conversation today about how we can infuse AI into BI tools. And it's also worth noting that if we were to take a step back from this 1 trillion that's unique to the financial services industry, this 1 trillion is part of approximately 15.4 trillion in expected AI value for all disciplines across the economy. And so really underscoring that not just in financial services, but throughout all aspects of how we do business, there is absolutely tremendous value to be had when we think about embracing artificial intelligence. Now, when we, in addition to this, we think about what analysts have been saying, and most importantly is what we've got underscored in red here, which is that of all of these prototypes and AI models that come out, only 53% of these actually get deployed and make it into production. And this really underscores the need for tools and frameworks that allow folks to spin up these models rapidly, to fail quickly and iterate fast, so that you can really get to the heart of the problem you're trying to solve and not devote months, if not years, dare I say it, into one of these projects only to never have it actually see the light of day. And I can say from my past experience, I think every data scientist knows at least 3 or 4 data scientists who have poured blood, sweat, and tears into a project and then ultimately not seen that project into production. So really underscoring that we want to make sure that we can enable people to do this quickly, so that if we aren't going to make it into production, we can find that out as soon as possible and just keep cruising right along. Now, accompanying this tremendous value and this hurdle that models have to getting into production, we have these 2 evolutions. And first is the workforce. And this top quote at this quote at the top right, I particularly like, emphasizing that for data science to truly be a transformational force, it's going to have to be something that's accessible to everybody. And this really dovetails into this democratization of data that Tableau has really evangelized. And so it's going to be essential as we move forward, just as we've democratized data, to democratize data science, to provide tools and features that are going to make it so that you do not need to have a master's degree or a PhD in data science or artificial intelligence to leverage these powerful models and begin to extract business value out of them. And as we're going to see in just a little bit, this is the sort of feature and tooling that we hope to provide to these newly minted business scientists, as we call them. When we take our gaze and shift it to the market as a whole, we typically see 2 approaches that have become clear. So I am a traditionalist, and so I am from the left-hand side of this. That was the top-down approach, which required a very adept understanding of a programming language, namely Python or R, a variety of packages, tools like Data Robot and Data IQ, as well as ancillary skill sets like model management, and then this last mile challenge. And that last mile challenge, I'm going to give you an anecdote for a bit later on, because that was the bane of my existence at one point a little bit in my last life. But what we're moving towards is this secondary approach, this bottom-up aspect for the data analyst. And so where we move from BI to AI, where we have this fantastic Tableau dashboard and we see some really interesting trends, and we want to take these descriptive trends that we've seen and move them to the next level, where we can now begin to easily apply some machine learning and AI to extract predictive insights. This is also an approach that is going to really embolden subject matter experts, those folks who have an intimate knowledge of the business instead of having an intimate knowledge of Python and TensorFlow and all these different esoteric data science packages. And we're going to empower these folks with tools like Tableau and Tableau CRM. And because so many people are going to be able to do this, it's going to naturally lead to a reduction in things like backlogs. And it's going to result in solutions that are much more user focused, because users themselves are going to be emboldened to create things like this. And ultimately, it gives anybody who has the ability to tell a story the power to do so. And so it no longer is a task that's relegated to data scientists and other folks with these really advanced skill sets. So breeze through that to give us that foundation so we can get to the meat of this here. But just to recap that, tremendous value within financial services alone to the tune of $1 trillion. And yet a significant portion, 53% of projects are the only ones that actually make it to production. And then we're seeing this tectonic evolution of both the workforce in terms of the democratization first of data and now of AI, and this market evolution where there just aren't enough data scientists to go around. And so in order to keep pace and really be able to get a slice of that $1 trillion pie, we're going to need to be able to embrace this bottom-up approach where we have these data analysts who are able to really push forward these exciting ML and AI contributions. So with that stage set, we're now going to begin to dive into this idea of the business scientist, which is a term that was coined here at Tableau. And so business science democratizes data science capabilities, helps domain experts understand the key drivers of a model, and all of this without them having to spend blood, sweat, and tears learning the different data science tools or having that master's degree in data science. And this is really integral to what we're going to see later on, is that nothing that we're going to show and the ability to actually create a model, which we'll see step by step later, is going to require any intense understanding of different model types like linear regression or random forests or any of those terminologies. Instead, it's going to be a clicks not code approach that's really going to ensure that you are able to do this very seamlessly and very rapidly, so that in the event that the model does fail, you fail quickly, you iterate quickly, and you can really just continue to push that needle forward. Now, it's worth noting the distinction between what we've coined as business science and what people canonically think of as data science. And this is nowhere better demonstrated than in the two little bits right next to the names here. So with business science, we have an emphasis on the immediacy and the context of the insights that we're getting, whereas with data science, we're looking at precision. And an example I often hear brought up that demonstrates this pretty well is if I am using my Google Maps, my Apple Maps, or some navigation feature. And so the data science solution to I am at point A, I want to get to point B, is that with data science, you're going to get the longitude and latitude of point B. With business science, you are going to get instructions, turn left at the next stop sign, go down 4 signals and take a right. Your destination is going to be on the left. And so it is this high level of precision for data science and this contextual information that comes along with business science that really distinguish the two. And it's really important to emphasize that you can have the greatest model in the world, but at the end of the day, if you cannot contextualize that model and make the predictions and the prescriptions from it something that can be readily used by your end users, it's ultimately for naught. And so that context is really an essential component of business science. On the left-hand side, we see some examples of what might constitute business science, what might constitute data science. And then, as with all Venn diagrams, there's an emphasis that there are obviously going to be some use cases that straddle both worlds as well.
Hey, Alex, if you don't mind me jumping in for the Capital One team that's on the phone and in the webinar, if I think back over the last 3 years, how we've worked together and this concept of building predictions inside, let's say, of CRM, or now the ability to embed those same predictions inside of Tableau, my impression, and I'm looking for some folks, that are on the phone to validate that the way Capital One is structured, where we pretty much sell by line of business, even though there are data scientist teams out there, it seems that this concept of the business scientist resonates pretty well in the lines of business because they know their data, they know the business problem they want. And I think what's important here is we're not saying that we're not trying to play with the data scientists, because in many of the other accounts that I work with, we look at what Alex is going to share as another tool that can be used between the business scientists with the data scientist teams. And Alex will touch on this last mile. That's what it's really all about. So the speed with which we can deliver and operationalize these predictions is really what it's all about. But I just want to do a quick poll of the folks on the phone from Capital One in their impression concept and get some feedback. Please don't be shy. No comments? Throw something in the chat. Oh, Braden, are you able to unmute everybody? Thanks, Andy. I appreciate that. All right, well, let's ignore that question. And Alex, why don't you move ahead?
Absolutely, but to really underscore one of John's main points there, what we're going to see later on is not intended to replace data science teams. At the end of the day, there will always be a need for the data scientists, because there are going to be some incredibly advanced use cases that it's going to take the white glove approach of a data scientist to really get to the heart of. Rather, as we've kind of been drilling in on, this is intended to provide a toolbox for those non-data scientists, but also a tool for data scientists to seamlessly have these predictions surfaced in Tableau, in Salesforce. And so we want to make sure that, I really want to make sure I emphasize that we're not coming for the data scientists. That's not the intention here, but rather to synergize with them and to empower those folks who might not have the same background as them. And that ultimately leads us to the tool that we have to empower folks to do ML and AI, which is Einstein Discovery. And so Einstein Discovery is all of these things on the left-hand side here. I'm going to walk us through each one of these to really underscore the value of how powerful this can be. So first and foremost, this is supervised learning, which simply means that it's going to look at historical data that you've collected, and it's going to use this historical data to help you predict outcomes in the future. And so this is one of the most common, actually, this is the most common form of machine learning. And so it's going to be something that's quite familiar to any data scientist who might be along. This is a no code required solution, and that is something we take incredibly seriously. We do not want you to have to write a single line of code to be able to leverage the power of this tool. And as I mentioned before, we're going to go through the process of building a model a little bit later on to really emphasize how simple of a process this is going to be to begin immediately seeing value. Throughout the entire world of AI and ML right now, there's a strong emphasis on ethics and transparency. And with Einstein Discovery, that is no exception here. So every model you get is going to have clear, human readable explanations, not only for what you're seeing, but why you're seeing what you're seeing and what you as an end user can do about it to actually move the needle in the right direction. And there are also certain protections put for protected statuses and different warnings that let you know that there might be an ethical consideration that you'll want to take a closer look at within your data or your model. We do component driver analysis, and you get a nice snapshot of this in this graphic we have on the right-hand side, where it's comparing order volumes from February versus July, and we're seeing the unique contributions of each various combinations of factors and how that relates to the difference that's being seen. Again, all of that in human readable English. As we saw before, with 53% of projects that make it into production, we want to be able to iterate rapidly so that if we find that we're going down a hole that's not going to bear any fruit, we can rapidly iterate, we can identify that, and we can move on to our next topic or project and not lose weeks, months, or dare I say it, years on a fishing expedition. We also make it seamless to combine data from anywhere. So no matter where your data lives, we want to make sure that it's going to be accessible for these sorts of models. And once you've created one of these models, you don't just send it off with a lunch to school on its first day and never see it again. You monitor that model over time to make sure it's continuing to perform well. And we provide an excellent framework to allow that, as well as to refresh the model. So if your data is changing over time, we want to make sure that your model is changing over time to account for that, so that you're always getting the most accurate predictions possible. And finally, my favorite one is this last mile prediction delivery. And John hinted on this and I've hinted on this, but this is, from my previous life as a data scientist, what I think is one of the most important parts. So as I mentioned before, it's all well and good if you've got the greatest model in the world, but if you can't deliver that, if you can't embed it where your end users eat, sleep, and breathe, it's all for naught. And the anecdote I have on this was I spent just over a year working with another data scientist to create a model to predict movements in foreign exchange markets for a portfolio manager at my last job. And we finally got the model where he wanted it. We packaged it up into an app. We gave it to him, and we monitored his usage over a month. And we saw that he wasn't using it. And when we asked him why, his answer was as succinct as it was painful, which was simply that if it doesn't live in my Bloomberg terminal, I'm not going to use it. And so this ability for us to, with nothing more than clicks, take one of these models and deploy it into Tableau or deploy it into Salesforce so that our end users can immediately begin to see that value really cannot be overstated. So my personal favorite bit there, and I hope folks will appreciate how valuable that is as well. Now, we have this tool, but at the end of the day, to really use a tool, you have to think, okay, well, what am I going to use it for? And so here I have listed a variety of use cases from some common verticals within financial services. to really help us begin to stimulate those ideas and get a sense of how we might use a tool like this. And so one of the things that should stand out to folks immediately is that if we look across the top row for all three of these, we see that client churn is a constant, or is a common use case for AI and ML models. And so that's actually what we're going to see an example of a little bit later on as I make a model. But I'm emphasizing that just because you have different verticals doesn't mean the problems are always different. Now, there certainly are unique problems to each one, but emphasizing that there can be a bit of continuity across. And then obviously the insurance one, probably not so important for Capital One, but what might be important instead of looking at something like a policy cancellation might instead be to look at a card cancellation. And so I provide these examples to stimulate the thoughts rather than show you how you might do things if you were looking to branch into the insurance industry. Cross-selling and upselling, lead conversion, white space analysis, account prioritization. These are all really common use cases and things that can be readily explored with Einstein Discovery. And just as important as this is for individuals, so too is it important for the managers, which we see underneath as well. So in addition to these broad use cases here, we're going to take this one step further down the rabbit hole and kind of humanize these a bit by looking at what these might look like for particular individuals, not just with an AI use case, but also with how these folks might use these things, these actionable insights we talk about that they'll need. And I'm going to zone in specifically on our retail banker and our manager here. And so the question you might get from a retail banker, is who are at the highest risk of churning? And we saw that what sort of AI question we'd be answering there. And also tracking deposits and loans and predicting potential future amounts as well might also be something of interest to retail bankers. With managers, top of mind for them is how is my team performing? Are we trending towards our targets? And you can have these models built up to help them answer those questions to predict quota attainment and things of that nature based on historical performance. And also important is looking at how folks are spending their time with activities, events, and seminars, and looking to see how those are ultimately relating to ROI and other KPIs that managers are going to be tracking. So when you're out there asking folks, hey, what do you need help with? These are some of the sorts of questions that you might get asked, and you can map those back to some of these AI use cases that we saw on the previous page. So ultimately, that gets us to what I'm sure most folks have been waiting for, which is this idea of Einstein Discovery within Tableau, which we abbreviate to EDT. And so what we can see here in this bottom left bit of the screen is an Einstein Discovery card. And this is one of the three ways that you can leverage these powerful models within Tableau. And so what we're seeing here is the results of one of those predictive models. But another place where Einstein Discovery distinguishes itself is it not only provides you with a prediction from a model, but it takes that two steps further by providing predictive insights. So not only what are you seeing, but why, and then prescriptive insights. So in addition to why am I seeing it, what can I, as a retail banker or a manager or an HR professional, actually do about this to push that needle further in the right direction? And so for this particular example, instead of looking at percentage of on-time delivery, we might be looking at percentage of on-time card payments or something along those lines. And then directly beneath that, we would see in human readable English explanations for the top factors that are causing us to see the score that we're seeing. And then beneath that, again, plain English, we would see what we as the end users can actually do to get that number higher. Or if we were trying to minimize something like minimizing customer churn, get that number lower. So really a very powerful tool that can be directly embedded into your Tableau workflow. And in addition to this, this is one of the four ways that we can leverage the power of Einstein Discovery in Tableau. And so what we saw was the second in this list on the left-hand side here, but we can also have these integrated in table calculations. We can also use this as an extension for Tableau Online, and we can also see these predictions in prep. And we will see examples of all of these in just a bit. And when I say just a bit, I mean right now. So I'm going to walk us through a demonstration. We're gonna begin with how we are able to create one of these models pretty seamlessly. And then we are going to jump into seeing these in action. So here I am in Analytics Studio. You can think of this as mission control for any of those business scientists or data scientists who are going to be using this tool to create models. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, I have this create button over here. With one click, I'm going to go down and select a story. At Salesforce, we love to rename things. And so story is our name for a statistical model. Now, in addition to creating a model from a data set that we ourselves have put together, which is the approach we're going to take, we also have a variety of templates already available in here. And so if you're not quite sure how to start, I strongly recommend these templates as a great way to see what a fully fleshed out model might look like. And so this is a great way to begin to see what a baked cake would look like, so to speak, before you start ruminating on how you can create your own exciting models. So I'm going to select to create from a data set. I'm going to choose one of the data sets I've put together from this list, and then I'm going to walk through this click-based wizard. And again, really want to emphasize that this is a clicks not code process. So we're going to bring this model from 0 to 100 without writing a single line of code. So I'm going to choose to do that canonical customer churn example. So I'm going to seek to take customer churn being true, and I'm going to seek to minimize that. I'm going to give it a name. And then I'm going to choose what folder to save that in, or as we call them, apps within Salesforce. I'm going to specify my story type. Here I can choose to get just insights, so just an examination of the relationships between the different fields and variables I've included in my data set, or I can choose to create one of these powerful ML models. It's worth noting that the only constraint on creating these models is that you have a minimum of 400 rows of data, which for someone the size of Capital One should never be a problem. And if we're looking at something where we are doing a classification, so a yes/no question, or in this case, a churn or did not churn question, the only additional constraint is that you have at least 100 people who did churn. And as long as you have satisfied that, you're ready to go. Finally, you can choose to make some manual edits before you begin this modeling process, or you can choose the automated approach where you let Einstein take the wheel and give it a first pass on your behalf. I always recommend the automated approach for folks when they're beginning, because Einstein does a pretty good job of really doing a lot of the legwork for you. And then from there, you can make your manual edits in the spirit of that rapid iteration we talked about before. So once we've done all that, I'm going to go ahead and click Create Story. And we're off to the races. And so now in the background, Einstein is crunching the numbers and taking care of business for us. So I would be a pretty bad chef if I did not already have a cake in the oven. And so we're going to jump to a model that I've already created. But we're going to leave this open because this is going to be done long before we're done talking today. And I really want to emphasize how quick of a process this is. But so once we have one of these completed models, this is the sort of rich output we can expect to get. And so I'm not going to bore folks with the technicals or really dive deep into any of the statistical bits here, but just give a high-level summary of what we're seeing. And so on the left-hand side, we have correlations of how all of the different variables that were in our data set relate to customer churn. We can see human readable explanations of what combinations of factors occurred when churn was the lowest, as well as what combinations of factors occurred when churn was the highest. And just from this one screen alone, we can begin to gain valuable insights. You know, for example, here, if I was looking at this AUM band here, this has a 100% churn rate. And so that, before I've even looked at predictions, might be enough of a red flag for me to say, hey, we need to figure out what's going on with this AUM band. So this is where all of our models begin. And once we've looked at all of this and we've gone ahead and made some recommended updates and tweaks, our model is going to be in a place where we as business scientists are happy with what we're seeing. But in addition to that, top of mind for most companies, especially a company like Capital One, I'm sure, is model governance. So we don't just want to have a model, but we want to make sure that that model meets the quality and control standards that we as a company have put in place to ensure that we're getting the best possible outcomes. And so on this particular tab, as well as the items on the left-hand side here, this is going to provide all of the information that a data scientist would need, or that any model overview board would need to certify that, yes, this is a good model. We feel comfortable deploying this model into Tableau or into Salesforce. So really just want to emphasize that you're not just getting a model with these explainable predictions and prescriptive insights, but that you get this full package where you can do this robust review to ensure that things are exactly as intended.
Hey, Alex, it's John. I was wondering if you could just clarify. I did get a question from Andy Ruffles just asking, is this TCRM? So could you just maybe articulate, how this is working, that we're leveraging the predictive capability within TCRM, and we'll show how this goes beyond?
Absolutely. And I didn't see that question in the chat. So please continue to jump in, John, if you see those there.
Yep.
So what we're seeing here, I'm going to take a step back, and this is just Analytics Studio and Einstein Discovery. And so while you do see the TCRM moniker up here, this is still going to be the interface that you would use to create Einstein Discovery models, even if they're going into Tableau. So I would, instead of thinking about this particular interface as Tableau CRM versus Tableau, I would think of this interface as Einstein Discovery. And Einstein Discovery models can be leveraged in either of those locations after they're created.
So I think what's important there, Andy, is that let's say we went down a path of doing a prediction for a commercial bank with Einstein Discovery. And maybe the goal is to push that into Salesforce so that the bankers or the relationship managers see the results of that prediction. You may also have a group of users that are only in Tableau. They don't work inside of Salesforce. And the benefit could be that we could take the same story and publish it inside of Tableau. So that's really where the value of the two. So a license that you have today for TCRM could be leveraged inside of Salesforce or leveraged inside of Tableau. Make sense?
And to add just a little bit of extra to that. So in addition to the 4 ways we saw that these models can be used within Tableau, and in John's point about being used in Salesforce, if we take all of that in aggregate, there are over 20 different ways that you can take one of these models and use these predictions to extract business value. So I really want to dispel the idea that you make a model, you get a prediction, you give it to an end user, and that's the end of it. Very far from it. There are just so many ways that you can extract value, even from one model. And so it's, I really just want to emphasize that, one model does not lead to one point of business value, but can really be leveraged in a variety of different ways. So after we've made our model, it's passed the model governance board, we've crossed our T's and dotted our I's, we can actually begin to deploy this. So I'm going to show you what this looks like in Salesforce, and then I'm going to show you in Tableau. Because the Einstein Discovery card here is, I think it's very nice, and it shows off the full customer 360, that whether you're in Salesforce or in Tableau, it gives a nice idea of how you might see this in the wild. And so in this particular case, we have this C360 dashboard to the left, but with Einstein Discovery, we see on the right that we have a propensity to buy prediction. And so again, as we saw before, we're not just getting a predicted probability of an investment cross-selling opportunity, but we're also seeing the top predictors explaining why we're seeing what we're seeing, and then recommended improvements to push that percentage even higher. So really just want to emphasize that this is what you'll see, whether it's in Tableau, whether it's in Salesforce, and deployment for this process is nothing more than drag and drop here within Salesforce. But now moving over to Tableau, we get a nice example of that model, the Einstein Analytics dashboard extension. And so we see that on the right-hand side here, and I'll blow this up a little bit for folks so you're not squinting. And so here, just as we saw within Salesforce, we're going to see that predicted score, and we're also going to see those top predictors again, as well as the recommended improvements. Now, as you have come to expect with Tableau dashboards, all of this is interactive. And so what we're seeing here is an aggregate across all 64 rows of our data. But if I was to click into Texas specifically, we are going to see all of this update. And so now we have the predicted attrition likelihood specifically for our customers in Texas, and top predictors specifically for Texas, as well as top improvements for this particular location. So you're not just getting a static card here, but this is a live prediction that is going to take into account what you're clicking and moving around with on the screen, and use that and reflect that in the insights that are being shown. So this is one way that we can use this in Tableau, and is one of my personal favorite, because this is the most approachable for all users, and those prescriptive insights in that human readable form really are a game changer for empowering your BI tools with AI and ML solutions. Now, in addition to this, we can also leverage these predictions via table calculations. And what's really nice about this is that this lends us the ability to do some really great what if analyses. So in here, we're seeing once again that dashboard extension, but we also have a table calculation that's hiding in the background that allows us to filter all of these things and then send the new prediction based on these factors we have down here. So if I'm particularly interested in clients who have only been with me for, let's say, 10 years, I can now see what the default risk is for those particular individuals. So slightly higher. And then we again get those top predictors and the recommendations uniquely for those clients who have been with us between 1 and 5 years. Again, we can look at their years in business. So let's bring that down to 5. And we can bring the cash on hand down with it as well. But the idea here is that not only do we get these static extension cards where we can just click on different bits of data, as we saw before, so looking at Texas or California specifically, but we can now also really modulate a lot of these different factors to begin to examine the what ifs and really do some great scenario planning and a scenario analysis as well to extract even more value from these predictions.
Hey, Alex, can I ask a question just for maybe the broader group?
Absolutely.
Based on your experience as a data scientist and what you've seen in working with Discovery, what are the biggest challenges and what kind of time frame is involved to help the folks on the phone understand how they can do this? Because I'm sure there are some folks that are saying, I don't have an Alex on my team, so how do I do this? Could you just shed some light for the group? And again, hopefully that will get some folks wanting to contribute. And you should all have the ability to unmute yourself now if you'd like.
Absolutely. And hopefully everybody has an Alex on their team. It is a pretty common name. But to get to your point here, with any data science project, the most challenging part, honest to goodness, 80% of your time is going to be getting your data, cleaning your data, organizing your data. Now, the beautiful thing about Tableau customers is that they have typically already put in the tremendous amount of time and effort that goes into getting them, most, if not all of the way there on the data front. And so Tableau customers are really in this very unique position where the heaviest lift when it comes to a data science project has already been done. And so if I think beyond that, the next thing where you're going to spend some time is if we think back to those business scientists and that knowledge of the business, it's going to be looking at this data that you've already got together and deciding what makes sense to include in this model. And as we talked about with that bottom-up approach, where we go from descriptive BI to predictive AI, just by using your Tableau dashboards, you'll begin to see some interesting trends and some interesting things that might be worth exploring further. And so I would encourage you to use those as a launch pad to decide on interesting questions you want to ask and use with these sorts of models. But in terms of timing, if we actually jump back over to Analytics Studio here, this model that we started spinning up, I'm going to say maybe 8 minutes ago, this is done. And so this is how rapidly you're going to be able to iterate on when you have an idea. I've got the idea, I've brought together the data, I walked through that clicks not code wizard, and now I have a model that's here ready for me to begin to fine tune and tweak a bit more. So in terms of time and the biggest time sinks, Tableau customers are uniquely positioned where there are not particularly huge time sinks, but that iteration process, I would say, and picking what data is going to go in, those are where you're going to want to have the most thoughtful inputs to really make sure you're getting a high quality model. So in addition to the extension here, as well as the table calculations, we can also leverage this in Tableau Online, which is actually what we're seeing right now. So we killed two birds with one stone there. But we can also see this in Tableau Prep. Now I'm remiss to report that when I was spinning up Tableau Prep to show it to you all right before this call, things were not quite going as planned. So I did a quick pivot, and I'm going to show you what this will look like using the Tableau CRM data prep layer. Now, I want to be very clear and emphasize that the only difference aside from aesthetics is one particular thing. And I'm going to point it out to you as soon as we get to it. But understand that functionally, what we're about to see is equivalent to what you would see in Tableau Prep. So I don't want folks to get hung up on you're seeing it in TCRM, not Tableau. There's not parity. I assure you, follow along and it's going to be identical. So the one place, so in your Tableau Prep, when you've got a flow, if you wanted to add a new node, as you'd expect, you'd go to your arrow here and you click that plus. Now, the singular difference between Tableau Prep and what we're seeing here is that in Tableau CRM, it says Discovery Predict, and in Tableau Prep, it's just going to say Prediction. That is, honest to goodness, the only difference between these two things. So you'd go ahead and you'd select your prediction in Tableau Prep, and then you get one of these nodes that pops up. Now, when the node pops up, you're going to pick one of the models that you've deployed to use to generate the predictions that are now going to be taken and automatically written into your data set. And so now with these things automatically written in, you can use them as you would any field in a Tableau dashboard. And you can also use them in other models as well. You could use them in a table calc as well. So really opens up the way that you can leverage these powerful models. So you'd go ahead and you pick one, you'd click next, and then that would be specified as the prediction you want to use for this node. From there in Tableau Prep, you're going to be shown a screen just like this that asks you to map the fields. Now, Tableau Prep is a very smart tool. And just like we're seeing here, it's going to automatically look to see what fields have the exact same name, and it's going to do a lot of this mapping for you, or in our case, it did all of the mapping for us. And so once we've made sure that the data that is expected by the model is in our data set, as we've done here, we then have the ability to tweak some extra options. And so I'm going to scroll this bar all the way down to the side here. And we can see that by adding this model, we have a predicted churn score already. But we can take that 2 steps further by adding in the top predictors, as well as the top improvements. And we can specify how many of each we want. So I'm going to say that I want the top the top 2 predictors, and I want the #1 recommended improvement. And when I go ahead and click apply, you will see here, just as you will see in Tableau Prep, this little preview of the data that's actually, if we scroll all the way down, going to show us that information. So if I'll just zoom this out one bit here, scroll us back over. And so we see on the leftmost side, we have that predicted churn score, but now we have that supplemented by both the plain English name, or the plain English bit of the predictor, as well as the impact of that top predictor, the second one and its predicted impact. And then we also have information on the recommended improvement. Worth noting that if we see any blank fields here, that's simply saying that for this particular individual, there is not a recommended improvement, that we've done all we can, or that the data hasn't found anything that would meaningfully enhance the relationship we're looking at. But that is how easy it is to leverage this in Tableau Prep. And again, as I mentioned, aside from the aesthetics and that one naming bit, this is exactly what you'll see if you leverage this in Tableau Prep. So 4 exciting ways that we can leverage the power of this in Tableau. And just to recap on what those were here. So you have them for the table calcs, which facilitated that what if analysis. You have that dashboard extension, and that dashboard extension also works for Tableau Online. We saw both of those in play. And then finally, you can take these predictions, as well as the predictors, as well as the recommended improvements, and you can write all of these into your data sets to begin leveraging them just as you would any other field in a Tableau dashboard. So for folks who have seen things here today and who are excited about what they've seen, you can actually get hands-on with this with a free trial here. And we also have a variety of tips and tricks. Bobby Brill is one of the product managers for Einstein Discovery. And he writes some fantastic articles really talking through this process and talking you through not just those 4 approaches we saw, but how easy it is to get those to appear. And again, that is also a very easy process. You'll simply authenticate with the Analytics Studio that we saw. And then you'll just take the ID that comes with each model, you'll put that in, and then you have access to the model. So it's typically a 2-step process, and you're ready to hit the ground running. In addition to this, we also have some content on YouTube and through our Salesforce Learning Days to really ensure that you have all the training that you need to really get excited about what you've got here. So to fully summarize on everything we've seen today, we talked about the foundation for why it's so essential right now to really be thinking about how AI and BI intersect with that 1 trillion in value just for financial services alone on the table. And then also how important it is to have a tool that gives folks the ability to rapidly iterate, given that only 53% of those projects make it to production. And we talked about the pressing needs of this simultaneous workforce and market evolution, really emphasizing why there needs to be not only a democratization of data, but a democratization of AI tools for non-data scientists, these so-called business scientists. And finally, we walked through the power of Einstein Discovery, how this is a highly transparent, no code required tool that's really going to supercharge your BI experience, that's going to handle that last mile delivery, which, like I said, near and dear to my heart, and is going to provide a great tool, not just for those business scientists to begin to explore these things in that bottom-up approach, but also give your data scientists a tool to very easily create models that they can seamlessly embed in Tableau and give them and model governance folks all of the pertinent information they need to be confident that the models they're deploying are high quality and meeting all the standards that the Capital One has set. And finally, we saw this in the wild. We saw how this can be used in 4 distinct ways with Tableau, and we saw how easy it is to actually spin up one of these models and how quickly it can be spun up as well. So at this point, I'd like to thank folks for taking the time to be with us today. And with the 12-ish minutes that we have left, I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have.
And you all should be able to unmute yourselves if you want to ask questions, or just feel free to post them in the chat. And we're going to be silent. All right. So as I mentioned, we will have a recording available for those that were on the call today. We'll also make the deck available. And Alex, if you wouldn't mind just advance to the next slide, we do have our final session for the webinar series that we've built for Capital One in October. The next date is October 19th, and that'll be about embedding predictions. So please, if you've registered, go there and get yourself registered for that. And again, it looks like, okay, we do have a couple of questions that are coming in. Jordan.
Yeah, so I guess I had like 2 questions. First one being, like, once you run a model, how do you define the success criteria? I know you just like ran a data set real quick, but just wondering, like, how do you just like navigate that, and how do you quickly identify like which variables are having an impact versus variables that could be like false indicators of like success?
Alex, did you?
There we go. Yep,
okay.
yep. I had to. I was muted. I was the offender there. So, in terms of success of the model as a whole, depending on whether we're looking at a classification or a regression. In the case of classification, we quantify the quality of the model using AUC, area under the curve. For regression, we use R-square. Now, in terms of quickly identifying which variables are most meaningful, we look at the correlations of the particular variables. And we also, during that model fitting process, leverage both L1 and LL2 regularization to filter out variables that are not meaningful, to ensure that only the ones that you're seeing are that the ones that you are seeing are providing some degree of value.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I had a second question too. From a data prep standpoint, what's the best way to approach like time series data? So like we have an example within small business bank where we're trying to solve for churn. So I saw you had like a few buckets within the within your data set. I would like to see if you could just talk through some of those and kind of some of your rationale as you do some of that data prep. Like, how do you group the data? Which time periods do you look at? And then I guess some of that trend information, like how do you group those together?
Sure. So I'm going to ask a follow-up there with, so you mentioned that it was client churn, but that you're looking at it from a time series approach.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate a bit more on what exactly you're trying to predict?
Yeah, so within small business bank, we have essentially small businesses, and we're just trying to minimize their churn. So they have balances, they have essentially account balances, they have many different accounts within a relationship. So looking at that, we don't want to just like throw the balances in, and then if they have zero balances, then they churned. But at that point, it's too late. So I just wanted to see, like, how do you look at data, I guess, over time, and how do you bucket that so that you can have that preventative like catch?
Sure. So I don't know. Based on my time as a data scientist, I don't know that I would approach this from a time series perspective necessarily. I think what might be a creative way to look at this without a time series would be to do those individual level churn predictions and then aggregate that up at the branch level, it sounded like, or at the bank level, to be able to show each particular location, like, hey, you have X% of your folks who have a churn score that's above a certain percentage. And this is how long they've been above that percentage. So have create a field that looks at if you set the threshold of, let's say, 75% churn risk, as soon as they cross that threshold, begin to count the days that they have been at that threshold to really elicit action from the folks who are consuming this information. But if a time series approach is how you'd prefer to take this, we do support Holt winters, both multiplicatively and additively for capturing seasonality or lack thereof with time series. And in terms of binning time, that is generally something that I would suggest having conversations with your business folks about in terms of trends that they see. So, like, for example, if I use an example close to home, when we do deals with or I guess when we do deals with financial companies, a lot of those deals occur in Q4. So having time that's like Q1, Q2 might not be so important, but Q4 is very important. And so to figure out the optimal temporal binnings, that's going to be a conversation you want to have with the business folks so that they can lend you their insights and then use that information to make your decisions.
Okay, and then I guess from like I'm a pretty much like a new user using the tool, and I've just been essentially doing like data dumps. Is there, and I know I've seen within your the data set that you use, there's a bunch of different like buckets and things like that. Is there any advice from like a new user standpoint that I could start looking at versus just like dumping data in and seeing what works?
Sure. So the bucketing that we saw when we selected that automated approach was Einstein's best guess at how we should be bucketing this data. So by default, Einstein's going to look to do 10 buckets if it can, but less if there's not enough variation. And it uses an approach called kernel density estimation to make that decision of, can I actually do 10 buckets that have a reasonable amount of information, or should I do fewer than that? And so when you use that automated approach, it does give you a good first pass that you can then use and tweak a little bit further. So if you think back to the AUM bucket we saw, where I saw that, wow, this AUM bucket, there's 100% churn. If you actually looked at the numbers for that bucket, they didn't quite make a lot of sense. And that's because for that first pass, Einstein is optimizing on that kernel density estimation and not on business logic. So what you can do after you've had that first automated pass is then look at these buckets and say, okay, this is a good first attempt, but now how can I change these to more closely align with what my end users are going to expect to see? So use that automated approach as a good platform, and then you can make edits to align with business expectations.
Okay.
Hey, Jordan, it's John McDonald. I can't remember, did we put you through the Einstein Discovery class for TCRM, the Academy session?
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't remember. I've been through like one of the sessions previously, and
All
I
right,
just
so
started
then-
getting into like some real world experience, or just getting
Okay.
into the tool recently. So
One idea, I'd be glad to reach out to you separate from this, and maybe I can get Alex on a call and we can just try to working with Tony. So maybe we can set up some time offline, and we'll see how we can help you a little bit more on that. Okay.
okay, that's fine.
Okay. We've got about 4 minutes left. Any other questions out there? All right. Well, on behalf of Atrium and Salesforce and Tableau, we'd like to thank everyone for joining. Please keep an eye out. We'll have the recording coming out. We'll get the deck out. And then we do have a final session on October 19th about embedding predictions. Thanks very much to Alex for sharing what he shared today, and hope you all have a great rest of the week. Thanks, everybody. Take care.